Welcome everyone to the mid-year residential recap. I'm going to go over the stats for the 6 months to date. I'm sure all of you are aware I am your 2022 BDAR president, Luke Woolsey. We're going to keep this relatively short and sweet today and just go over kind of a macro, not a macro, but a large scale overview of just kind of what we've done sales wise in terms of listings, sales and pricing, just to kind of give you an idea of where the market's at currently, and maybe put a couple of fears to bed in terms of just what's happening out there with a bit more actual data than anecdotal evidence. So we're going to do a year over year comparison, 2022 versus 2021. We're going to do a month over month comparison with a 6-month overview and a market activity trends from 2019 to 2022. So looking at the graph in front of you here, less than 6 months ago, we were facing some of the tightest conditions in history, with demand outpacing supply by an extraordinary margin. And now those trends are beginning to reverse, with new listings returning to the market at a faster rate, bringing much needed supply to our communities. 3,755 residential units were sold in Simcoe County during the June 2022 year to date, which was 35.6% less than the same time frame in 2021. Barrie saw a slightly larger decrease at 38.8%, less than the same time frame in 2021. Simcoe County, excluding Barrie, saw a lesser decrease of 33.8%. And I want to note on all of these, this is a decrease in the quantity of sales, not in the sale price. The average price of residential units sold in Simcoe County during June 2022 was $936,993, which is still 21.2% more than the same time last year. Barrie saw a slightly larger increase at 24.2%, and Simcoe County saw a lesser increase of 19.6%. Now, we all know these prices are down on a month over month basis as from their peak, which we saw in February of this year. But it's important to be clear that they are still considerably above the same time frame last year. So when you're looking at June over June, or this is a cumulative year to date, so from January to June over the same time last year, we're seeing significantly higher prices than we were. But we all know that they are on the decline versus earlier this year. Moving into the Simcoe County municipalities individually, taking a look at all of Simcoe County, Barrie has accounted for 33% of the total sales in the last 6 months, and declining sales trends are the same across the board for pretty much every municipality. Here you can see the year-to-date average sale price for all of Simcoe County municipalities. All have seen an average increase compared to the same time last year. Looking at Simcoe County over the last 6 months, average sale price peaked in February and units peaked in the subsequent month of March. In June, units sold are lower than they would be considered at typical levels for the month, but not by what people would kind of expect, right? When we look at an average, or not an average, but we look at total of 522 units sold in June, we normally sit around 700 or so. We did peak in some of these busier months, both in 2017 and in 2021 at around 1,200 or so sales. So it's a big drop from that, but it's only really a couple hundred sales less than we would normally see in June. If you go all the way down to the bottom of that chart, you're sitting at 19 days on market, which is a big increase from 9 days. It's 10 more days. It feels like 4 days out there at the height of the market, but we sat around 9 when you factor in different things. 9 seems high, but when you really think back to a normal market, 9 is still quite low, right? We used to sit 30 days, 60 days on market. Not on average, obviously those are upward trends, but you're going to see anywhere 45 days wouldn't be unusual. Whereas 19 is still quite quick. So when you start taking all these factors into consideration, there's a lot of kind of misconception about just how slow things are when you're comparing that to the peak a few months ago, but it's not at all a slow real estate market. It's still definitely a seller's market, even though the inventory is trending up, but it's still what would be considered a pretty fast-paced real estate market. In June, the months of inventory numbers of active listings are the highest they've been since October, however, highest they've been since October 2019 at 19 days. This slide here just kind of shows you the trend of pricing as we go through the years. So the June 2022, and this is an HPI number, so it's going to be a little bit different than what we report on a board level in terms of our current average sale price, because this is something that's done nationally to take a more of a snapshot that takes out some of the outliers and whatnot. So it's a bit of more rounded number, but from this perspective, BDAR would be sitting at $841,200 for an average sale price in that time frame. If you look a month ago, that was sitting at $889, 3 months ago, $946, 6 months ago, $830. So really, we're still sitting above where we were 6 months ago. We're sitting far above where we were 12 months ago, let alone 3 years ago, 5 years ago. Those price increases have been sustained over the last few years. It's just that extra kind of boost that we've seen through the later half of 2021 and the early part of 2022 that's been eroded away back to a more reasonable level. But when we look at a year over year or even a 6 month basis, we are still sitting considerably higher in average price than we were. Looking at how some of these statistics trend over time, just have a general graph here showing you from 2019 right through to 2022 for units sold. So you can see it is fairly cyclical how the pricing can, or sorry, not pricing, but the amount of units sold goes up and down over year and month over month as we go through different kind of springs and falls and things like that. So even though we are seeing what feels like a fairly slow sales process right now and a fairly low amount of sales, it's actually still sitting far above where it actually was even in December of 2021. It's above where it was looking at here in December of 2020. It's above where it was in April of 2020, right? So 500 sales for June, not really unreasonable by any stretch. Again, Simcoe County market activity trends for price. So again, everybody knows the price progression from January 19 right through into January and February of this year was nothing but straight up, and now it's come down. But we are seeing it's come down to, if you kind of look at this chart here, roughly to where it was in November of 2021. And it'll be interesting to see if it does go down a lot further. I believe personally it'll come down a little bit more, but not drastically more, and then it'll start to level out. And as soon as it levels out, it'll probably start to tick back up. Looking at the new listings, again, very cyclical in terms of either just time of year or year over year, and when we see more listings and less listings. The amount of listings on right now has come down slightly than where it was in March, but it is still quite high. It's among the highest we've seen since looks like April 2019 here, since we've seen this many listings come on all at once. So that is what's driving a bit of just perception out there that it's not that there's necessarily less sales happening, but because there's so much more inventory, less of the inventory is selling all at once. And then active listings and months of inventory. So again, this all follows the same type of pattern here. So obviously the more listings you have, the higher that month of inventory. If you're not getting the 100% absorption over the last little bit, pretty much everything we can put on the market through 2021 was absorbed right away. And now we're seeing that go up to a more normal level. Still not quite a balanced market, but nearing closer to that range. Over the years, they've said a balanced market is somewhere between 5 and 6 months of inventory. Being on the ground, I think we all feel closer to 4 and 5 months becomes pretty balanced. But we're still sitting under 4 months right now, with that still climbing a little bit. So whether or not we'll reach rate balance will be interesting. I don't see it flipping into a buyer's market anytime soon, though. And then you have your average sales price and list price, and just going over the differences in percentages there. So obviously, as we went through 2020 and 2021, we saw everything being significantly over asking. We're now sitting at, I believe it's 98%, if I'm not mistaken, of sales to list price ratio, which is still quite high, but it's paltry compared to the 110s and 115% we were seeing earlier in the year. So nothing too shocking there, really. It's more just, a visual description of what we're seeing out there. Again, if you are thinking that things are very, very slow, I urge you to kind of step back and look at this a little bit and see that it's not really that unusual for a June. It's certainly unusual to what you saw in February in terms of just the pace out there. And it is a little bit slower than an average June, but not a skies falling mentality, not a particular departure from what we would generally expect to see in some of the slower months. And I think that's going to continue through the summer. And then it'd be interesting to see what the fall does. There's a couple of reasons that prices have obviously called a little bit, and one was just that it was impossible to sustain that kind of rapid price increases through any longer, right? When you saw just these ridiculous 30 and 40% increases, that was demand being brought forward by people being fearful of not being able to purchase because they were going to continue to increase. And once that kind of dried up, people then wanted to reset a little bit and see where prices were going to fall, right? So my personal projection is that once people see that this is going to be the bottom of the price point, that demand hasn't necessarily gone anywhere. Interest rates will hamper a little bit because affordability has gone down, especially for first-time buyers. Big mortgages out there, if people are financing at 5% down or even only 20% down, are going to have a big nut to carry at a 5% interest rate, right? So that's going to take some demand away. But the level of demand we have, the lack of supply in housing has not changed. There's still a massive amount of people out there who need to purchase homes. But when they saw the interest rates go up and they saw the prices start to come down even a little bit, they kind of pulled back and said, well, let's see where the bottom of these prices are. So that'll be interesting to see if we're there. I'd say maybe another 3-5% drop is possible. And then those people are going to be coming back to the market and purchasing once they see that the prices are not going to be falling any further. And that will start driving prices back up. Not at, we're not going to immediately go back up, 30%, but 5, 6, 10% a year as we used to see. I think it's going to be probably returning back within a very short time frame. So if you have any questions about that or about these stats, feel free to reach out to myself or to Laura or Julia at the board office. They're always happy to discuss. Hope this was helpful. And as always, reach out. Talk soon. Thanks, guys.